and right now it's my pleasure to introduce Jared Bendis, who feels that your video projects suck, but that's okay, because so do your papers. I can't wait to find out why. Jared Bendis is an award-winning artist, teacher, and photographer who is creative director of new media for the Friedman Center at Case Western Reserve University. As creative director, Jared weaves together cutting-edge technologies with proven, innovative pedagogical strategies to create rich multimedia experiences. As a specialist in photography, virtual reality, and computer graphics, Jared instructs courses and workshops in digital media and manages the creative and technical aspects of immersive virtual reality, 3D experiences, and PDA projects. He authors training materials and articles for the popular press, and he presents on the use of technology in instruction. He also photographs castles beautifully. Please join me in welcoming Jared.
Well, thank you very much. First I need to explain why I only have one slide. Some of you have heard me speak before, and while I'm apt to repeat myself, I usually don't give the same presentation twice. My standard MO is to give a rapid-fire slide and bullet presentation, and Second Life is actually not the venue for that. Also, there's something about Second Life requiring me to turn my slides in ahead of time, and I am, that's a little too rigid for my slide. Yes, no PowerPoint again. So I only have one slide. Plus, the real thing is I've been to enough of these online conferences to know that many of you are going to be listening to me while doing other things, but I'm cool with that. So there's a reason I'm telling you all this, and it's actually related to the topic of my presentation. The first is you need to know your medium. And Second Life doesn't like my rapid-fire style. You need to know your audience, which means that you're all in other windows, and you need to know yourself, which means I don't like to prepare that much ahead of time. So we'll get back to that shortly. Now, some of you may have been a little, I don't know, peeved, angered, upset, or even curious about my title. And I want to sort of clarify that I really don't mean the self-selected students. I don't mean a student who decides that they're going to do a student video project. I'm all for that. I think there's a lot of people doing a lot of good stuff out there. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the assigned projects. I'm talking about those professors out there who are assigning, you will do a video project, and there's a lot of them out there doing this. And I pretty much challenge people to argue with the second half of my original premise, and that is that their papers suck. Having 42 students this semester, I have to tell you that it is a rare pleasure that I get one that is easy to read. Most students don't write very well, and they've been writing a lot longer than they've been doing most other things. Most students do not turn in papers that we would say are, ready for prime time, ready for publication, things like that. And I find it kind of amusing that when we give student video projects, and it's usually their first video project, we just make an assumption that their first time out is going to be something that is anyways halfway decent. And it's kind of a good thing to realize this going in so that we can make sure that we're sort of reaching for what's doable. Now, this really takes us to the idea of writing versus authoring. I think when we talk about writing, most of the students write. They write it for the professor. They write it knowing that no one else is going to see it. And if we were to say, by the way, everyone's going to see your paper, everyone's going to see it, we're going to publish these things, hopefully there'd be a little bit more care, there'd be a little bit more time with these things. And the idea of writing for a public audience or even producing anything for a public audience can be a little bit, scary at first. Now, I was actually talking to an art teacher the other day about this, and he disagreed with the premise at all. He's like, what are you talking about, Jared? In the art courses you teach, everything that we do is supposed to be for show. And in some ways, I completely agree. He's absolutely right. Everything that we do is kind of designed for the show. And then I was thinking about that, but we design our projects for that. We actually have rubrics, very specific rubrics for what these projects are going to be like, and critique is part of the process. We're very specific about making sure that we critique things along the way. As an art teacher, the projects are designed for growth, success, and public display. But as a writing teacher, they're usually designed for something a little different than that. And even as an art teacher, sometimes we only go for partial success. I'm looking at my own photography students this semester, and it's only important at the end of the day that each student has one or two good photos that they can show. They don't have to be Everything else doesn't have to be good, but enough has to be good that we can say, all right, you were a participant in it. We're not going to show everything. Now, part of what we have to do here as well is prepare faculty. And one of the things that I run into a lot is the faculty under a lot of false assumptions. The first false assumption is that the kids know what they're doing. Now, this idea of digital natives. Now, I, by the way, am one of these people who do not like the concept of digital natives. I've never been that whole digital native, digital immigrant thing. But even if you buy into the argument, which again, I don't, I would think that you can't really say that our students are video natives. Matter of fact, the older you are, the more immersed in video you probably are. I think that the older adults have seen more video and have been exposed to more movies and more genres of film than students have. And so because of a wider range, adults should be better than students are at film. So this assumption that the students are better doesn't really wash, even if you go into a digital native argument. I would say that we are more the video natives than them. Now, our students, by the way, generally come to the table with no skills, very little vision. I don't want to say no vision because people mad at me for that, and no resources. Often they'll talk about, oh, my still camera takes video, which is fine for little things, but not when we're talking about doing any sort of level of production. And so the professors tend to forget that the resources become an issue. It's not about pen and paper anymore. A lot of them believe that the system will take care of them, that there's an AV group somewhere out there that's just going to provide their class with everything without bothering to contact them first and find out what's really doable. There's that it's not my problem attitude. More importantly, there's the false assumption that the students want to be doing this. I was in a class the other day where I had a student very angrily stand up and say, excuse me, but how the hell does this relate to the topic? I signed up to write papers. I didn't even want to write those papers, but I did not sign up to do a video project, and I don't understand why you can say this is part of my education. And it's kind of interesting because at some point you have to go, he's got a point. You know, we didn't sign up for these things, and a lot of professors just throw them in so haphazardly that they forget to realize that there are expectations that the students come in with. Not necessarily the video course. The courses on video obviously are on video, but we're talking a lot of English courses and political science courses and anthropology courses are requiring a lot of AV projects. The other thing is about sort of the scope that happens with these things. A book is written by one person, and a movie is produced by hundreds or thousands of people. Now, I understand that not all those people are really required. I'm sure that Steven Spielberg could leave his driver at home and still make it to the studio, but he still requires a lot of people. I can write a book all by myself. Now, I know that it would be nice to have an editor and a printer and a publicity person, but at the end of the day, I can hand any one of you a book all by myself. And a movie requires a lot more people than that, and we instantly start realizing that these aren't necessarily individual. More importantly, we can't pretend that we're going to do it like the pros do it. This isn't our model, unless obviously you're at a film school. If you're at a film school, it's a different scenario. Pretend I never said anything. But for our own model, we can't pretend that we're doing it like the pros because we don't have their resources or even their time frame. And when did that actually become our goal? What is our goal here? Some professors go, well, I really want my students to accomplish something. Why isn't learning accomplishing something? More importantly, what is the goal? What is the pedagogical goal? To plan something? To produce something? To distribute something? Even if those are the case, who says you need all three? Why not just one? Why not just say our students are going to plan a movie? Our students are going to write a movie. Our students are going to produce somebody else's movie. So that each of these things can be broken down, and you may not do everything. Perhaps it's about pride. I want my students to be proud of what they do. Well, you know what? Why not get them proud about the things that they've been doing a lot more often, which is writing, which I would argue was a more needed skill in the rest of their curriculum. Not to say that video isn't important. I believe in video. Matter of fact, I teach it. Now, right now, I'm teaching a course on new media literacy, and you'll hear more about that at the summer conference. And in my course, my students were very surprised to find out, first day of class, that the entire course is not about production, only analysis, that there is no production whatsoever being done in my course. I'm not even making them do a PowerPoint. Now, part of this is very simple. I don't want to teach my students production, but I also don't want to suffer through their productions. I have sat through enough bad PowerPoints and bad video clips where I've been the assistant who's come in to help, that I really don't want to be the primary ones. I don't want to look at my students and go, God, you guys just screwed this project up. So we're actually spending all of our time on analysis, which I think will, by the way, help them when they get a little bit further along. But I do want to talk about who I help. And I help a lot of people. I actually assist more video projects than I probably would like to every semester. Now, in a previous talk, I mentioned about an experience I had with a group of high school students that come and intern at the library over the summer called the Future Connection students. Now, these students spend half of their time at the library and then half their time at a cultural institution. And we're an experience for them. They get paid. And unlike a lot of places that just have them like making copies and doing straight stuff, because we're a library, we spend a lot of time making sure that they actually accomplish something. They do research and they produce something. These students come in with no experience and no background. Now, originally somebody said, let's make them do a PowerPoint. And, as you can imagine, it was a little fun. They had a little research. But we said we wanted something bigger for them. So someone said, let's make them do a short film. Your standard, let's do a 5-minute film type thing. And what was interesting about this is, and I've talked about this before, is that the people who were in charge of this project before I came along on it forced them to watch 1 hour of Ken Burns' The Civil War. And if you've watched this, it's dry. It's good. I mean, it's wonderful, but it's not something that a bunch of high school kids are going to certainly embrace. And actually it became the running joke because we wanted them to produce something, but they didn't have anything in their memory that related to what they were going to produce. So you have to first make sure that you can say, what am I trying to make it like? The idea of having some sort of an exemplar, and Ken Burns is not an exemplar for high school or college students necessarily. So we talked about what experiences they already had. Now, I often play an exercise. I play this, and I've mentioned this exercise, but I'm going to tell it to you again because this exercise I play every single class. I walk in, and we try to find some common film. I try to say, who has seen this? Who has seen this? And it's kind of interesting to find out that in a room full of people, it sometimes takes a while to find a movie that everybody has seen. It actually turns in the other way around. You don't actually say, who has seen? You go, who hasn't seen? Who hasn't seen Aladdin? Who hasn't seen Titanic? Who hasn't seen? Luckily, with Dark Knight, almost everybody's seen it. But sometimes it gets challenging, and you'd be surprised about the fact that they can't talk about the same thing in their own popular culture. Now, eventually, we do get to the idea that they have seen documentaries. Students tend to see documentaries a little differently. We tend to talk about things like VH1 Behind the Music and things like that, something that we can say they have experience with on their own, something that they would feel more related to than being crammed down their throat. Now, one of the interesting problems that had happened with this project was that each of the students was given a mentor. And one of the things that we've looked back on is the mentors weren't trained with them. They didn't have time to go through the technical training. And since the mentors didn't go through the technical training or the aesthetic training, the mentors couldn't help them at all. The mentors were actually of no help whatsoever. More importantly, the students violated what I would refer to as rule number 1. Rule number 1 is it's not about you. The video wasn't about them. The video was about a research project that they were doing. And while some of these were personal topics, I kept reminding the students that you need to inspire me, but don't tell me that you're inspired. If you feel very passionate about something, don't tell me I am very passionate. Share with me in a way that topic that inspires the passion, the way that you've been inspired. Remove yourself from the story. Make it a video that's something that somebody other than your mother would like to see. Because a lot of the videos I see, and I'm not talking to those of you who do digital storytelling initiatives, I'm not really talking about that because I know that that really is more personal and there's a lot of therapy that goes along with this. But I'm trying to go to the more standoffish thing. I want you to realize that you can talk about something and make me know what you feel without saying the words, I feel. So it's got to be more third party than that. Interestingly enough, the end screening that we had over the summer, we had all their parents come and their high school students, and while everybody was thrilled, I couldn't help feeling like I was watching the end of The Music Man. Everyone's applauding and screaming and going, "That's my boy!" But deep down, I wasn't as proud as I could have been with some of them. Now, some of them were amazing. We had some that were beautiful, but some literally videotaped themselves, put themselves in it. And as soon as you remove the ego, as soon as you get them to go, you're not going to be in this, you're not allowed to be in this, it becomes less competitive internally, and the competition becomes to make things clear. Now, this isn't the only tragedy that I plan on talking about today. I was involved with an English class a few years ago where we were just talking about analysis. One of the greatest types of analysis papers you can give a student is to have them write a movie review. State project, movie review. Talk about what you like, what you don't like, what you see. Look at the things that you're intimate with slightly differently. And some of them were good and some of them were bad. And as I was flipping through one, and I always challenge students to go through and find a classic. Go rent a movie that you've never seen, that you heard was good, that you thought was interesting, that your friends talk about, and see if you can analyze it at that point. And I pick up the paper, and it says a movie review of Rocky. You know, Rocky's a great film. That is a classic film. It's a good film. Then all of a sudden, I look down, and it isn't Rocky. It's Rocky 3. And I always think about that student who's sitting at the Blockbuster and he's walking down the shelves. He's like, "Hey, look, there's Rocky. There's Rocky 3. I'll rent Rocky 3." And that disconnect of what are you trying to do? We once had someone try to do a movie review of Scooby-Doo. You know what? It's hard to write a movie review about something that doesn't have that much information to begin with. Now, I do want to talk about some success as well and sort of the things that lead to success. We have a course here called The Politics of Russia. And in this Politics of Russia class, the professor has assigned the students within 3 to 5 minutes have to do either a propaganda film, a commercial or series of commercials, or some fake news and interviews. And what we've learned is that when we sit down to teach the students to do these things, we actually have a first session. And in that first session, we don't do anything but talk and watch video clips. We watch examples of these things. We get an idea of what does it look like? What kind of stuff are we looking at? And when we're looking at these things, we're taking a look at more of the technical things as well as the aesthetic things. What do they leave out? What do they include? Most importantly, what she does not show the students are the previous class's exemplars. And when I asked about this, she's like, you know what? It's more about them doing things. It isn't necessarily about them seeing what the other class did. In this way, the videos are really the journey. I want them to know what it goes to make a propaganda film, to experience propaganda, to experience these things. But at the end of the day, she could throw it out. It's like a math assignment, right? At the end of the day, the students do all the... They're not actually solving a problem by going through their math assignment. They're solving their problem, not somebody else's problem. Not everything has to contribute to the greater body of knowledge. And what's nice is that she's clear that this is not a publishing exercise. They also are doing group work. They're actually working in small groups, which is very useful for this type of project. We do a second time we meet, we do a workshop. And this workshop is very intensive. It is a either 2 or 3 hour session where I teach the program Premiere Elements. And I don't know how many of you use Premiere Elements. And for those of you who use Premiere Pro who've not looked at Premiere Elements, look at Premiere Elements. It is not watered down in the same way that Photoshop Elements is. Premiere Elements, I can do most things in. And I rarely go back to Premiere Pro, by the way. So I'm using Premiere Elements. I'm not using Windows Movie Maker because Windows Movie Maker really doesn't teach them enough of what I want them to do in terms of them being able to move on later on. I want them to get some standardized skills. I want this to be a scaffold through their education, that if they decide they want to move to another program, they go, oh, Premiere Elements is sort of like all of them are. Premiere Elements is also expensive enough for them to do it, and more importantly, I have it in the classrooms as well as the entire media center that we have here. What's nice about this is that in 2 to 3 hours, I can show them all the technique that they need. In that first hour, I'm winding them up. In that second hour, I'm letting them go. And they do some amazing work. Part of it's the teamwork, and part of it is they're inspired to really do a good job. And I always think about that when I'm teaching these workshops. I'm thinking about these students with giant springs on their backs as if I'm winding them and letting them go. Another project that we had recently was an anthropology class that was designed to make podcasts. What's fun about this example is that they first sessioned with me just about audio recording. They weren't doing any video work with it. First about audio recording, and then a week later they met with somebody from the local radio station who gave them the whole thing about here's how you do interviews and recording. Afterwards, the report came back that we had completely contradicted each other, that everything that she had said that to do and not to do, I had said the exact opposite of. But the joke was that nothing that she had told them to do were they able to do. It was infeasible because of the equipment and the staff that they had. It wasn't about being right. It was about being. We have to work within the confines that we can in these environments. That's the first thing that we have to get used to is we have to set our sights not too low, but to a reasonable level. Interestingly enough, this project brought up the situation of original content versus hard work. One of the students grabbed the audio recorder, asked a really good question, waited 10 minutes while the person answered it, turned in that as their audio project. And the trick is it was interesting. The problem was, that's not what the professor wanted. And this becomes an issue of not necessarily legality, but about what am I asking you to do? For instance, let's take it back to a paper. If I asked a student to write a 3-page paper, and they started off with, Mark Twain once wrote, and then for 3 pages quoted Mark Twain, it would be cited properly, so I couldn't call it plagiarism. Mark Twain is in the public domain, so there would be no question of copyright, let alone even if we steered away from fair use. But it's just not what the professor asked them to do. It wasn't theirs. They didn't have a stake in the final project. And that balance of having a stake in what's done, to say this is mine more so than it isn't mine, is really, really important. It's something that we're going to come back to. Other courses that I've helped recently have been things like on the difficult nature of filming dance. We've got a documentary film seminar course where they're analyzing documentaries, and I'll be helping them make documentaries. We've got somebody doing stuff on broadcasting on the self. Now, these are English seminar courses, so they're mostly about writing, which have the addition of a little bit of video here and there. One course that I'm really interested in talking about is a course that I didn't help at all. One of my students who works for me came into the center and said, hey, my professor said today that if we didn't want to do our term paper, we could do a 5-minute video instead. This professor has 40 students, never talked to the media center, doesn't know anything about what we have and what we don't have and what we can do. So I emailed them and I said, hey, let's talk about this. Let me explain what we generally do in a situation like this. And I've heard nothing back from this guy. So he's offered his students no training, no support. He hasn't told the media center about it. He also ignored the communications, and he's made some dangerous assumptions. For instance, we have 15 cameras for 15,000 people. We have a 2-day loan period with a $20 a day fine. Now, to overcome some of the problems that we've had, I've actually instituted what I call a 3-hour loan. Some of the cameras are on 3-hour reserve. You can borrow them for 3 hours. If you're late, there's a $20 an hour fine. We don't want the fine money, by the way. We actually don't get to keep it. We want our cameras back in time. And so when I got 20 classes thinking, oh, we're all going to make our projects the final project of the semester, I go, hey, how about you make yours due at midterms? You make yours due at 3/4 of the way through the semester. Let's start pacing these things off. And no, they don't have camcorders. Walk into a classroom and ask them how many of them have camcorders. They'll go, my still camera takes video. And that just isn't the right quality. It isn't the right kind of stuff that you need. Now, interestingly enough, one of the other tricks that we have is that my student employees are under instructions that if a student walks in and identifies their project as being a class-related project, that they are not allowed to help unless they know the exact parameters of the project because they don't want to overstep their bounds. And so what ends up happening with this is that because they don't want to overstep their bounds, they're told, hey, you need to go back to your professor and help and figure out what we can and can't help you with. By the way, I say 15,000 people. That's 4,000 undergrads, 8,000 grads. They're not all converging at the same time. But even then, there will never be enough cameras to make everybody happy. Now, I actually teach my own course, and it's kind of fun to talk about this because I've got full control of this type stuff. I'll get back to fair use in a moment. As we get to my own course, what they're doing is they're making a how-to video. And their how-to video is they have to teach somebody how to do something. Now, it's an individual project. They are doing these projects individually. At the same time that it's an individual project, it's also a group project because you can't work alone. So I've got to film you, you've got to film me. You're always going to find a buddy to help you along with it. And the real trick is who's going to be on camera. A lot of times people make the mistake of, I want to be on camera, and so they have the other person with less skills be off camera, or vice versa. And you have to figure out, do you have the right people working for you? Now, I do not like group projects, by the way. I really like individual projects. I always talk about how I was burned several years ago. I was co-teaching with somebody who thought that the groups should be self-selecting. And I, of course, don't believe in this, but I let him go on this one. And so all of my Type A students, all of my crazy, overactive kids joined the same group. On the other hand, all of my slackers ended up in the same group because they didn't show up to class the day the groups were selected. So I ended up having the slackers in one group and my Type A's in another group. What's funny about this is the answer or the outcome wasn't what was expected. The type A's did what I like to refer to as an overambitious failure. They bit off way more than they could chew. Their eyes are much bigger than their stomach. My slackers knew exactly who they were. They planned a project that was doable, and they did it in a reasonable amount of time. And it was good, and it was polished, and it was finished. It wasn't a broken giant project. It was a complete, reasonable project. So I always warn students, first off, is this an overambitious failure? And I love that term. And I love people who know themselves. One of the reasons that my students do a how-to video is that they're all going to be future teachers. And since the topic is a how-to, the topic is one they're supposed to already know how to. They have to teach you how to do something. So we instantly take the writing off the table, that it's already something that they probably know what to do. They also have to do something that's concrete. It can't be conceptual. They have to know it has to be, you're going to do this and this and this. They don't get how difficult conceptual is, A, to explain, and B, to make interesting. Though I do actually show one conceptual video to them that is really bizarre. And I always say, this is an example of what this project isn't. Now, unlike my other courses, when I show my students how-to videos, I show them lots of exemplars. I mean, lots of exemplars. And they watch every single video, and we critique them in class so they don't make the mistakes the other ones make. And most people who are teaching video projects forget that in art classes and in most art-related projects, we do publicly critique. We go through these things. And I'm teaching an English class right now, or at least a writing class right now, and every time I hand back the papers, I go through and I read aloud lines from papers, and I say, this is good and this is bad. I don't necessarily name names when we do this, though a lot of them volunteer, but I think critique and reflection allows them to learn from each other, not just, all right, these are your mistakes, and go on from there. Now, one of the bigger things that we also run into is that you can't cram video, as much as the students will try. Remember, students are cramming everything that they can get their hands on. I've learned a trick to this, by the way. My students who, instead of writing 8 pages every 4 weeks, write 2 pages every week. Now, if they cram those 2 pages every Saturday night, but otherwise they'd be cramming the 8 pages every 4th Saturday night. So writing 2 pages a week, cramming 2 pages a week is at least writing on a regular basis. You can't do that with video. You wait to the last minute and you're screwed. So what we do is we put speed bumps in the projects. With my writing kids, it's very easy. I go, your paper is due May 1st. And they go, yay, I won't think about it till May 1st. Then I go, oh, wait a second. Your first draft is due April 1st. And they go, oh, yay, I won't think about it till April 1st. And I go, oh, wait a second. Your thesis and your bibliography are due March 15th. And they go, wait a second. We force them through it. We force them through it. And the same thing goes with our video. We say, all right, your video is due May 1st. Oh, by the way, you're going to give a full PowerPoint. You're going to give me a visual run-through of it a week from now. And 2 days from now, you're going to give me the premise. And I do it NMC style, by the way. In my class, when they go to give their PowerPoints, the PowerPoint has to be 4 minutes long, plus or minus 30 seconds. I pull out my 5 minutes of fame gong, thank you very much. And when they hit 4 minutes and 30 seconds, I gong them, and it's over. They need to know timing is everything. Now, when it comes to the video has to be 3 to 5 minutes. And I always tell them, listen, I'm not stupid. I've been around the block. That does not mean 2.5 minutes of video and 30 seconds of credits. It also means that at 5 minutes, I turn off the machine. It can't be 5 minutes and 2 seconds. And we live by what I like to refer to as the no defense rule. Any introduction, any defense, any explanation that the video clip needs has to be in the video clip. If I get up and give a talk, I can't say, all right, I've got 45 minutes to talk, but I'm going to talk for 15 minutes first about that 45 minutes, so I got an hour. No, it's all got to be part of it. So when I put that DVD in, I go, you keep your mouth shut. We're going to watch the DVDs. The only thing that we're going to see is what you put on there. And it's a really hard lesson. Everything has to be in it. Now, one of the ways that we help our students, by the way, is to learn to remove the hard things. First thing we remove is anything that involves timing. Students are horrible at timing. This usually means the first things I basically ban are the Ken Burns effect. That means the zooming and panning of images. While it is very interesting and very useful if you're a professional, most people do it either too fast or too slow. So we take that off the bat. We take, you know what, put the image on the screen, use multiple images, but do not pan around your images. I would rather see you say, here's a face, here's a body, here are the legs, than that. I'm sure you're going to do just fine. Now, the other things that we kill are rolling and crawling text. Most students will use this to fill time, so I don't let them do it. More importantly, the crawling of text across the bottom of the screen is instantly going to be annoying because it competes. Think about that. Most crawling text competes with what you're watching. It's sort of like, look at me, no, look at me. And of course, most people just don't know how to make their roles look good. So we keep them simple. Anything that involves them trying to figure out custom timing within a software package, we just forbid. And then we make them watch a lot of stuff. I make them watch a lot of edited materials before they do anything. Reality TV is your friend. Make them watch Survivor. Make them watch game shows. Make them watch pop-up videos. Make them watch things that are edited and do things in similar ways that they can do. The holy grail for me when it comes to teaching video editing, in the sense of analyzing video before you do it, is make them watch Law & Order. Law and Order is as simple as it is produced. It's people filmed in real locations with simple cuts, no special effects. It works well. A little bit of fades. And I don't make them watch them. I tell them on their own. You need to go through. You need to be able to identify. You need to be able to say to yourself, my video looks like this. You need to be able to identify who are you going to be. And when they start realizing that most video uses cuts and not transitions, we start talking about that transitions have to have meaning. That when you put transition in a video clip, what are you trying to say? What is that crossfade meaning? We're moving to a different time, moving to a different place. I want them to start understanding it. If they can't analyze something, how in the world are they going to be able to produce something? Now I have to move on very quickly because I've got a lot of other things to talk about here, and this next one's going to be a little bit hot, I can already tell. This section I have on my paper in front of me is called Ethics, Morals, Copyright, and Privacy. I will actually not just try to differentiate between ethics, morals, and copyright or privacy here. We'll just glom it all together. But you must assume that the video will end up on YouTube whether you like it or not. Whether you ask them to do it, whether you don't ask them to do it, you must assume that students today, if they produce something, will post it. That has to be part of your equation. You can't hide and say, well, I never knew they were going to do that. You know what? They're going to do it. And because of this, everybody needs to sign a release form before they film. Everybody. I make my photo students do this. My video students do this. Everybody has to sign a release form. And I actually went to the university and I went to the university attorney's office. I said, I need a new release form. And they said, what do you need it for? And I said, I gave the exact parameters. I said, we have students doing student projects that then need to be posted and owned and blah, blah, blah. And I'm going to quote a couple of lines from this. By the way, I posted the university release form on the link above that you're going to see. This is a quote, I also waive my rights of privacy in the image and likenesses, including but not limited to any rights that might otherwise be protected by the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. There are FERPA issues here. When especially if we're even thinking about forcing our students to publish things, there are FERPA issues. Also, I understand that the university cannot control the unauthorized use by persons other than the university once it's been published. So the idea that these things are going to escape our control. So if we know that they're going to escape, or we even consider that they're going to escape, we must have release forms. I am very, very firm about this. Also, everybody needs to understand what they're doing before they film. I actually had some students tell me that they were going to do some filming in Walmart, and they were kind of going to bully their way in. And I said, you know what? I said, that's unethical. And they go, well, I could do it. I could get away with it. I said, you know what? We had somebody do this to one of my students. We had a student with a video camera come into the Friedman Center and say, oh, I'm going to film in here. And they called me because, that's my job. And they said, well, I almost didn't call you because I figured what could happen. And I said, wouldn't it be nice if some kid doing a student project went and got you fired? And could you imagine doing that to some poor kid at Walmart? You talk him in to letting you film there, and then his manager comes over and says, you weren't supposed to do this, and fires him. So the idea of ethics, you get permission. When these kids aren't student journalists. They're just students taking a class where they're trying to do a little bit of video. We also talk about the use of commercial music and sound effects. And of course, understanding that their performance of a Bob Dylan song is equally commercial. Now, I keep trying to tell the students it's not a question of fair use. Even when there are questions of fair use, I take them off the table. I don't want fair use to factor in. It goes back to that question of originality. It's about ownership and personal ownership, to say it is not about whether or not I was allowed to use this. It's about how much of this was my original authorship. We at the Friedman Center have a lot of royalty-free materials. I have spent a lot of money buying stock stuff for kids to use. We own the BBC sound effects collection. We have a lot of stock music, and we have 1 million pieces of clip art. 1 million pieces of clip art. Kid had to catalog them all and then fired and then quit. So anyway, when the students are using these things, it becomes very important for them to realize that they can only use stock materials as stock materials, that it can't be the focus of their presentation, that if they're going to use background materials, they have to stay in the background, that I have to be able to look at them and say, this is your stuff. I was just given my 10-minute warning, so I'm going to go through and wrap it up in the next 5 so we can take some questions. Now, I'm a big fan of parameters on projects, and you're going to go on that website, and I hope you do, and you're going to see a variety of video clips that I've posted for you that sort of ask some questions that I like to ask of people along the way. And one of the video clips you're going to see is called Ubiquitous Shovel. And what had happened is that the Cleveland Christian Film Festival put out a call for amateur films that had to use the color orange, a shovel, the word ubiquitous with the theme the road less traveled. I know it sounds a little confusing, but that was the parameters that they put on all their films. I found out about this, and I grabbed my Saturday afternoon student intern. He's a high school student. We grabbed some miniatures, and we filmed a stop-motion video. We had a good time with it. We worked on it. It was fun. It was cute. We kind of had fun time with it. We came in second place. And when you watch it, you're going to laugh because it's not that, amazing or anything. But it does do what it was meant to do. It tells the story. It follows the parameters, and it allows me to call myself an award-winning filmmaker. Now, I've also done a couple of things on that website, by the way. I've posted what I call the technical rules of filmmaking that I give to students, and you can go and look at them yourself. There are things like using a tripod and never working with children and animals and getting a second take. But I want to talk about one very important one that I don't want to skip. And the link to the student release form, by the way, is on that page above. And one of the things that I like to talk about is what I like to refer to as the giraffe problem. And the giraffe problem is very simple. As a photographer, if you go to photograph a giraffe, if you hold the camera in a portrait mode orientation, the picture will be larger because a 5x7 is a different size than a 7x5. However, the giraffe is the same size on a TV set, no matter whether it was shot portrait or landscape. Students have a problem with this, and we spend a lot of time reminding them that the black bars on the sides of a screen are annoying unless they're constant, and that understanding the aspect ratio of your medium is extremely important, and do not rotate the camera, and to fill your screen, and to sort of own what you've got. Now, I'm going to jump ahead and talk about the aesthetic considerations. These are the questions I ask of my students. What are you making? What are the ingredients? Do you have a checklist? Do you know where you're filming? Do you know who you're filming? Do you know who you're filming for? Who are you? Is it a vanity project? And 2 important lessons. Offensive is still offensive. We ran into this the other day. Our class had a class on viral video, and some of the submissions were not ready for class. Some of them would have qualified possibly as hate speech. And I said, listen, we're not going to show them. That it crossed the line that you wouldn't have crossed in another medium. And you have to ask yourself, why would you cross that? The biggest lesson we tell people is that funny is hard. Now, if you go to this site, and I invite you to do it afterwards, you're going to see a list of videos. And each video comes along with a question. The first, or at least a statement, the first is that we all want our videos to go viral, but they probably won't go viral. We all want our video to win awards. They probably won't. We all want our videos to tell a story, but we don't have to be in them. Not everyone will like what you've made or think that it's funny. Ask yourself, are they laughing at you? Are they laughing with you? I know that Larry loves to show the herding cats video, and I show it too to my students all the time. And the reason I show it to them is that for a video like that to be funny, you need to understand the medium to be able to control it. And do you understand it that well? Do you know who you are as a presenter? Are you funny? Are you serious? But more importantly, are you ready to shelve your first video project as a level of completion and an experience, and then just move on to the next one and say, all right, that's good, let's go. So with that, I would like to say, any questions?
Thanks, Jared. That was you know, it just amazed me. You can just sit there and do that with no slides, and it's just brilliant. I really enjoyed it. I have one question while we're waiting for people to type their own questions in chat. You mentioned that you constrain your students in certain ways, like not using the Ken Burns effect and other things like that. And I was wondering if a student has ever come to you with a really good, well-conceived idea that breaks the rules that you impose on them, and what you said or what you would say if that happened.
Oh, that's a great question. I'm teaching color photography right now, and one of the projects is an analogous, complementary, and monochromatic color project. And the kid totally screwed up the monochromatic photo, but it had so much style to it that I said, all right, first of all, let's talk about this. Are you willing to take the hit in the doing what I told you points to get the credit in the that's damn good style points? You know, you make them make those decisions. For instance, we're going to be using Premiere Elements, but I know for a fact that one of my students in my graduate course is an award-winning filmmaker. I mean, a really award-winning filmmaker. And when she said to me, "Can I use Final Cut Pro? I'm an expert in it." And I said, "Yes, you can use Final Cut Pro. However, you must follow the program." And I'm very keen on it because I want people to be able to follow the program. Can you work within your medium? Can you work within your constraints? I did see a question. Somebody asked about, can you get the URL for the videos? If you'll notice that I rarely post my students' videos, I'm posting what I demo to students, not student videos. I don't want to show my student work so much. I will be getting some releases, and eventually I might show more student work. But there was another question, wasn't there? Did I see something?
I'm looking back.
I think someone may have asked if okay, so questions were, is it wrong to use video from a cheap digital camera because it's completely editable? Well, the real trick is that we tend to talk about the difference between slideshow videos versus video that comes with camera. We've had people do it, but more importantly, it's always the motivation as why they're trying to use those cameras. What I usually let my students do is they give me a sample of the film, and if I think it looks good enough, I'll say go continue with it. And don't get me wrong, I've got a couple of great point-and-shoot digital cameras that produce decent video, but rarely is the video really editable or stable or clear enough. So it just depends. If the quality is good enough, I'm all for it. But across the board, I like to keep things clear. I do not run any courses completely taught online, by the way. And I think somebody asked about whether or not that my anti-Ken Burns thing was sort of across the board or not. And by the way, I'm specifically talking about student projects who are, this is their first foray into production. This is the first thing that they're going to do. How do we help students that the first time they make a video, make something that they can look at with pride, that we can grade honestly, and we can show and look good? And what we do is we take things out that might be a little confusing. There was another question about FERPA, but I missed it.
I thought you answered that one as you went along. But if someone asked a question and it was not answered, please retype it.
Thank you.
And it looks like somebody's typing right now, so hold on a sec.
Interestingly enough, if you go to the Yul Brynner one, what you'll see, you'll see the Yul Brynner videos up there, and most of the students, by the way, laughed when they saw it. They didn't get it at first. They didn't know who Yul Brynner was. They didn't understand the nature of the video. So I'd go back and I'd watch the videos, watch them from start to finish. Take a look. They're not very long. I just didn't want to use up my 45 minutes having you watch videos. Well, one of the ways you avoid FERPA issues with student video projects is to make sure that the release forms are signed. And the students have to sign them as well. Everybody's got to sign everything. I mean, what happens, and I tell this to faculty members, what happens when a student says, I do not want my stuff public? I actually was working with my students this semester, and I can't make my students become Facebook friends with me so that we can do, online social experiments. I can them do something else, but I can't make them do this. I can't get in their face and in their lives. Though I did invite all of them to join me on Mob Wars because I'm desperate to have more people in it. And some of them joined and it became a class activity, and some of them didn't. But yeah, everybody signs a release form, including the contributors, because we have to assume that the student projects, which by the way, as a teacher, I have a stake in, the student projects, when they sign the waiver, I then get to make sure that I can use them in my stuff as well. The archive of the release forms, that's a great question. Right now, the University Attorney's Office didn't tell us what to do with them. I tell my professors to keep them, but more importantly, our university has something called Digital Case, which is a digital repository. It has its own deposit form, and at the time that we take the deposit form, we also take the release forms with them. Do I review or teach reality show type material, or are my students into that? It has not come up for me to do that. Just to put things into context, I teach in the art department. I teach color digital photography. I also teach Introduction to Multimedia. This semester, I'm also teaching a freshman seminar course called The Unexpected Artist and Critic, 21st Century New Media Literacy. So these are the academic courses that I teach. The rest of the workshops and stuff that I teach when I facilitate video production is when somebody says to me, and any faculty member on campus can do this, Jared, I want my students to do a video project, help. And we come in, we structure it, we build the parameters for it. We usually do it in 2 sessions, and we're done.
Okay, and I feel a little bit like a Second Life noob because I was sitting down and so I missed a couple things that people typed in ChatBridge. So if you typed a question, I missed it. I'm very sorry. I wasn't intentionally trying to ignore you. I was just clueless. We are actually right at the end of the time. There's another question for Mob Wars, so I would encourage people who are interested in that to stick around and maybe talk to Jared now about that. But I wanted to kind of say thank you and get a round of applause and sort of formally close the session, and then you're welcome to continue the discussion. So let's have a round of applause for Jared. Who did a great job, thank you.